Hi, welcome to Wobbly Woman TV. I'm Lisa Barrick, and today we have an author interview with the lovely Natalie Nixon. Hi Nat, how are you going?
Hi Lisa, very well, thank you.
Today we'll be talking about Nat's new book, Blue Almond Eyes, an Australian story about forbidden love. Nat, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're welcome, you're welcome. So it's actually more than just an Australian story, isn't it? It's a big story. It's a universal story.
It is, definitely,
isn't it? So,
without a doubt.
Would you like to share with our viewers a little bit about what the story is about?
Well, it's basically, I got the inspiration from the story of my great-great-grandparents. He was a Chinese man and she was an English woman, and they fell in love in about the 1860s in rural Australia.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah, it was a very taboo thing. As you can imagine, they suffered terrible racism and discrimination, and but despite that, they loved each other and they got through that. And when they died in their early 80s, they'd been together almost 60 years.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so
that's a true love story.
Absolutely,
isn't it?
yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of the book, isn't it? That there's a little bit of, I mean, what genre would you define it? It's a little bit of romance, a little bit of history.
Yeah, and historical fiction, I guess, with, as you said, it's some romance thrown in. I mean, there's a message there around how no matter, whether we're black, white, yellow or green or purple, we all still love and feel and love our families, and love is colourblind, really. Love is love.
I love that.
Yes,
that's beautiful.
Yeah. So there's a message around racism, of course, and how that continued through even to my childhood and growing up. Not my children. I was able to sort of remove them from that, but so it sort of goes through all that, through all the generations, and how their love for each other affected the generations to come.
Yeah. So it is a grand story, isn't it? It's an epic tale because it does go through some of the generations, and it's interesting how, I don't want to give it away, but it's interesting how you weave past and present, and it makes it quite riveting. Nat, what inspired you to write the book? So you said it was based on your ancestors, but what actually triggered you? What made you think, I want to write this book?
Well, I was always fascinated by the fact that, growing up I wasn't all that fascinated because, I hated being, teased at school, and I hated the fact that my grandfather was referred to as the old chow. I always took that was just so offensive.
So were you, sorry to interrupt, were you a little bit embarrassed by your heritage?
Oh, definitely embarrassed, and always felt second class. And he was actually a wonderful man, a very, very generous soul, and helped a lot of people. Yet, his nickname was the old chow. I mean, that was just the small-mindedness of, not necessarily the small town, but just the times.
Yeah.
I was born in 65, so people were still very, people referred, to the WOG and all of that awful.
It was like the White Australia policy and
totally
different. Yeah.
Growing up, like I said, it was embarrassing, but I was never allowed to ask. I was never allowed to ask any questions. My grandmother used to say to me things like, don't go looking because you might not like what you find out. Oh. Yeah. So,
but I mean, every family's sort of got those things. I know my family said things like, oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it's all right. And growing up, I didn't ask questions, and then as I got older, and I started to think, it's actually really cool, to have this heritage. So I was actually started to do some research and actually see what I could find out. I mean, Ancestry.com is all the rage now, and I went looking, and so I found out a lot of information, and I started actually just to document it, to share it with family members. and I thought, well, this is actually a really good story. Yeah. And what happened was one of my sons, they're no longer together, but one of my sons had a Chinese girlfriend. And the minute I met her, the first thing that came to my head was, oh my goodness, we've come full circle.
Oh, God.
And that was the inspiration for, the other couple in the book. I mean, they're nothing like the couple in the book, all that's made up, but that actually was the inspiration behind that. Oh, so I just thought, you know what, I was going to have a go at writing this story. And I thought, all the awful stuff we went through as a family, I thought I could just turn this into something, this adversity that it was, growing up. It wasn't any fun. Into something really positive.
That's wonderful.
And spread a message. Yeah. Really that, we're all the same. Yeah. Yeah. And this being better than somebody else, it just doesn't actually really exist. It's only in those people's heads. Yeah. So
God, it's a message that we need to hear today, don't we? In so many countries around the world and our backyard, and it's a big message. It's beautiful. It's sort of like the little story, not that it's a little story, but it's your family story is like this symbol for something much greater. Yeah, yeah, I thought so. And I thought their story was worth telling because they loved each other regardless. And, it probably would have been a whole lot easier not to be together. Yeah. But they survived through it, and as I said earlier, had a dreadful time. But I guess they had each other. Yeah. So and love. And if you have that love with someone, then anything's possible. Yeah. You can get through anything. Oh God, that's beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. So, how did you actually start writing it? Because people often have a story. Everyone's got a story, but to actually start writing is quite difficult. Not everyone gets to start writing and finish the story. So what made you actually start writing it? Well, it was interesting because I had started writing and I'd written, a couple of, not chapters, but starts of chapters. Yep. And I went to a friend of yours for a reading, David Laws. Hello, David. Lovely man. And he said, oh my God, as you know what David's like. He said, you've got to meet my friend Lisa. Oh. And of course he told me about what you do, and I got in touch with you and went and did your creative writing course, and that's what really got me going. I realised I could really do something with this, and of course you helped and guided me and mentored me through. And yeah, I guess that's the message, isn't it? It's, regardless of whether you go and see someone or grab a book from the library or whatever it is, just what's the first step? What's the first step? And I'm glad that David, absolutely, introduced I am us. Too, because here we are, yeah. And yes, so I just can hear you saying, show, not tell, Nat. So once I got my head around that showing and not just telling the story, because I think from what I can remember, Nat, I remember you coming to me and you had like a few pages and you said, look, this is the story. Now, how do I make it like a book? And I think that's the thing. It's like you had the seeds of it. And I remember doing, we'd sit down and get the butcher paper out. Yep, definitely. And I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Like when you have the idea, it's just getting those ideas down and out onto paper and then padding out the details and turning it into a story. And that's not that easy to do, is it? You need a little bit of work. It's a lot more work than I thought it would be. That's right. And that's what I wanted to ask you. Yeah. What were some of the challenges with the writing process? Literally just finding the time, as in because you really have to give yourself a few hours when you do get going. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard just to get going. Absolutely. Isn't it? Like you go and clean the bathroom. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I'd sort of
I'd often go to our office and do it, so that there was nothing else to do. So I'd just go and sit with the team and write away, and that was what I was there for, to write, and that made me do it.
That's good. So that's a really good tip for our viewers.
Absolutely.
Get out of
your house. Because it's too easy to go and put a load of washing on or anything, sit on Facebook or whatever. Right. But if you actually, like even a coffee shop, because you're there to do that, so it'll literally make you do it. Yeah,
that's great. Yeah. What are some of the highlights? What were some of the highlights of actually writing the book? What did you enjoy about it?
What are some of the highlights? Just reading back, and actually a few times I'd read back and I'd go, oh, that's actually really good. And just really as it unfolded, thinking, this is so worth telling. You know, this is just really is a great story.
I think that's the joy, isn't it, Nat? Like, you might start off thinking, I've got writer's block, I'm not sure how to tell this story, and then as, the keyboard or the pen flows,
absolutely,
things come to you and your imagination can go wild.
It really can, And as I went along, I came up with different, I remembered things that had happened in my life that I could sort of bring back to the message all along, you know. Just little things like, for example, I was reading in the newspaper about how a lot of the big, farming properties are now being bought up by wealthy Chinese. And I just remember thinking, well, that's another full circle for me. It's just like, oh, wow, when my, great-great-grandfather was working on one of those big farming properties, I mean, he was just considered nobody,
labourer,
nothing.
Yeah. So, did you do a lot of research for your book, or was it really about, family stories or memories, or, what you found on birth certificates or things? How much research did you actually do?
Well, originally it was a lot of research for, birth, death and marriage certificates. And it took me many, many months to actually find their marriage certificate. I actually didn't even know one even existed.
Wow.
So that was very exciting. And I had to do quite a bit of research on China and how things would have been, because I don't really have a whole lot of information about him, except that I know that he was educated, because I have his signature in Chinese on his daughter's birth certificate. So that's things like that were really exciting.
Yeah, because it's like a piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
And you can construct a bit of a story around that.
Yeah. And I did actually contact a friend of mine who's a clairvoyant, and we did a little bit of work and with the photograph I have of my great-great-grandmother, and she said that she picked up that his family were well off and had like a fabric business, beautiful Chinese fabrics, and that's sort of helped with the story. And it sort of made sense, because if he was educated, they would have had to have had money. So I had to I did a bit of research there, and obviously of what it would have been like coming on the ship, what the ships would have been like, and the names of things on the ship, the mast or whatever, and also describing, life in England for Alice, the character based on my great-great-grandmother, and, what it would have been like for her as a little girl. Yeah.
I quite enjoyed those bits, I really enjoyed the historical side of it, you know, and you get the detail really, even some of the early Australian stuff, you talk about wrapping things in a Hessian bag, because of course, they may not have had certain types of shopping bags,
well, that's right.
It's little things like that really make it real, and puts you in the story.
I think, exactly. I mean, like when he buys the doll for the child, he doesn't bring it home in a Target bag. Yeah, exactly. You had to sort of remember that and what they'd be wearing, and lots of research there.
Yeah, that's great. And so, okay, so any tips for any budding writers out there? You sort of gave one, get out of the house, but any other tips you think?
Just do it. Like, it's like anything. Just exercise or anything you want to get started on. Just get started, and and you'll surprise yourself, really.
Yeah.
And if it's something you're really passionate about, I feel very passionate about them. I'm very, very proud of them.
Yeah.
And was a story I felt I had to write. So I guess it's really
what
drove me.
Yeah.
But just get started, and like I said, you'll surprise yourself what you come up with. Yeah.
How does it make you feel to actually hold that book in your hand? I mean, it's not just a work of fiction. Like, I shouldn't say just a work of fiction, because it's actually a very personal, it is based on your ancestry, and you've turned it into a work of fiction. But how does it make you feel holding the book in your hand, knowing that you've brought this story to life and honoured your ancestors in some way, and what it's possibly going to do for your life?
Yeah, I actually feel very proud of it. I feel very proud that I could tell their story for them. That their suffering in one way wasn't in vain. That their love is still at work.
Through you and
your
family.
And thank you. Like, thank you for coming to this country and going through what you went through so that I can have this amazing life in our beautiful free Australia.
Yeah.
And, growing up on the land and around horses and the bush, and, I wouldn't have had all of that. And because Jimmy, my great-great-grandfather, was an incredible horseman, apparently. And, that sort of came through with, his sons and grandsons and great-grandson. I'm not such a great rider, but I just feel really proud that I could do that for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honouring them.
Yeah, that their story really is worth telling, and you never know, I just might make them famous one day. Yeah.
It just reads like a Hollywood blockbuster to me. I really see it like a movie playing on the screen, and I'm sure it would make just an absolutely fascinating movie.
Yeah, it's a good story. Yeah. It really is a good story.
Yeah.
And it's
because it has everything, Nat, doesn't it? Even the first line, you really hook people in with, you can't marry him, and then,
well, it's the other way around, isn't it? He's white trash.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's like, it's not. Whereas, my grandfather was the old chow. I mean, it's
Chinese, like the tables had turned in so many different ways. And the image of the cleaver, the cleaver. It's like, that's a great.
He's mad. He's not happy. Yeah.
So you really hook people in, and then just through all the different stories, back and forth, the modern story, and weaving it back and forth, and you entwine a bit of history, and like I said before, the romance, and then there's issues in there as well. There's a touch on domestic violence, in the past, and
absolutely
what it would have been like for our wonderful, women out in the bush. And
well, the domestic violence is actually a true story. Like, my great-great-grandmother was married to an Englishman, a respectable, wealthy, well, not wealthy, but well-off Englishman, and he beat her, and yet it was more respectable to stay with a man that beat her than to be with a Chinese man.
Yeah.
I mean, a white man that beat her than to be with a Chinese man. So,
but the guts and the courage that your great-great-grandmother had
to leave.
That's right. And with
1860s.
children, and that's right.
Yeah. No, she was quite remarkable. She was just apparently, a force to be reckoned with. She was a very, very strong woman.
And this is what I love. I wish more people would talk about these wonderful, heroic women, in our Australian landscape. Like, You know, often the men were away working or whatever the situation was, and they were there on the land raising the children with, you know, in tents and all sorts of things to start off with.
Just it's horrendous conditions.
Yeah, we can't imagine it, can we? So these stories really, they give us insight, don't they?
They definitely do. Yeah, you know, they had it so tough.
Yeah,
yeah. And what what a message she was sending her daughters. You know, don't put up with that.
Yeah.
You know, follow your heart.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, how have people enjoyed the story? What's been the response to the book as a whole?
Well, it's incredible. Like, so many people have said, "Oh, I just loved your book, Nat."
Yeah.
I got a message the other day from a lady whom I've never met, and she wrote to me and said, "I loved. Did I say loved your book?" And I thought, wow, she didn't have to do that. You know, nice. I don't even know this lovely lady, and she took the time to write that, and I appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
It's been amazing,
Yeah, because I guess, you know, you're creating, you know, empathy. Your characters do create a lot of empathy, you know, because I think they are quite real. You know, you do show different sides of human nature, you know, which is beautiful.
Absolutely.
You know?
And, you know, and I still think, you know, not even like in the 70s when I was a little girl, 60s and 70s, but it's still alive and well, racism. It really is. And I think...
Were you worried about any sort of negative feedback about that, or did that stop you from... Well, obviously it didn't stop you writing your book, but does that worry you in any way?
Yeah, there was a few characters that I thought people might recognise themselves.
Okay.
But then I think to myself, well, if that's the case, then, you know, guilty as charged, really. I don't know if we can put that in.
Yeah.
There's always that, you know, what will people think? I mean, we all, you know, even though you tell yourself it doesn't really matter, but we all have that. And
I think that's what stops a lot of people from actually writing their story in the first place. What will people think? But I guess the drive to write it and the wanting to honour your family was more than what will people think, wasn't it?
Exactly. Probably the story, you know, there was that old, am I good enough, you know, bubbling up to the surface a little bit.
Yeah. And that's normal. I think even experienced writers go through that.
Yeah.
you know.
But even, you know, around the racism growing up, you know, sometimes you revert back to that, you know.
Yeah.
Feeling of people won't like it, or...
You know, do you think by writing this story it releases some of the, what's the word, some of the trauma, or it's a way of letting go, a way of, I don't know, do you think?
It's definitely a way of letting go of the trauma and the... I mean, I'm 53 now, so it's like, you know, life experience has taught me that I'm as good as the next person, and, you know, I can do anything I put my mind to, but, you know, I didn't really have that belief growing up.
Well, so you were bullied as a child, weren't you? And you know,
definitely.
that you sort of talk about that in the book a bit through some of the characters. And
so it wasn't until I got on with my life that I realised that, oh, actually none of that was really true. So yes, it's definitely been a means of turning, like I said before, that adversity into something good.
Well, it's amazing how that adversity can shape, and you know, you think you're defined by the adversity.
Totally.
But you're not, you know, until you have that realisation that that's what they think, that's not me.
Well, exactly. That's just, I mean, you know, there's those that think that they're, you know, because they come from a so-called better bloodline, that they're better than people, but that's only in their head. You know, it's not really the truth. You know, people are people.
That's right.
And it doesn't matter, like I said before, what your skin colour is, you know. You're still a human being, and have the same feelings, and you know, everybody wants the best for their children and love their family
and live a good life.
And proud of their ancestors, no matter who they are.
What are your intentions for the book? You know, do you want to take it onto a world stage? I mean, we talked a little bit about maybe making a movie out of it. We can see that. But what are your intentions for the book?
Well, it's like I said, it was just a story I had to write. So for me, there was that sort of cathartic part where
personal
that
journey
personal journey, achievement, and getting it all down. But I hope that there could be a message in there. A good message. Actually, one reader said to me, "Oh, there were a lot of lessons in that book," which is sort of what I was trying to get at.
But you tell it through story. It's not a, you know, in-your-face didactic sort of thing where it's, you know, you're preachy. It's just told through story.
Yeah, and I didn't want it to be a big sob story either, like, oh, poor little old me, you know. Someone told me my favourite colour was yellow when I was a kid, you know. I mean, like, it's you know, it's not a sob story, self-pity. It was just...
well, these are the sign of the times. This is what happened. That's the story.
That's right. And, you know, so I'd like it to be... I actually, really, in a way, would like it to be read by kids, by teenagers, to get that message. And, you know, a few people have suggested to be a great movie, so, you know, who knows? I've got a few actors in mind that would be great characters.
George Clooney in there anywhere? Or?
We could fit George in, I'm sure.
What words of encouragement do you have to people who may have a wonderful family story or even a fiction story? What way can you encourage those people to get their story out there, you know, to write their book?
Look, I just say, like I said before, just go for it. And people are interested. People are interested in things that are different or interesting.
Because I think that's what stops people, isn't it? That you think, who would be interested in my story? But Australians love a good life story. They really do.
They do.
Or based on a true life story.
That's right. I've got the confidence now to know that my story was worth putting out there, and my great-great-grandparents' story and my grandfather's story. There's a character based on him. And you'll be surprised who'd be interested. You really would be surprised, because it's something that other people, your story, whatever that may be, is not something that somebody else has lived. So even though you know it in your head and you've lived it and gone over and over and over it, it's something fascinating to somebody else.
That's right.
So put it out there, and you just never know what, you know, you never know who you might reach and what your message might, who it might reach and what it could do for them. So just go for it.
That's wonderful, Nat. Thank you. So how can people find your book? Like, where can people buy your book? How can people find it?
It's on Amazon.
Okay.
It's called Blue Almond Eyes.
Okay.
And
so it's available as an ebook, and the print version should be available soon?
The print version should be here early November.
Okay.
Yes. So,
all right. That's great. So, well, Nat, I just want to say thank you so much for coming here today. I always love talking to you. I always, you know, you always tell me other little stories, you know, that are related to the book, and I think, oh, wow, that's so fascinating, you know. So it's just a fabulous story. I believe it's not just it's an Australian landscape, you know, sort of, but it's such a universal story about so many different things. And it has such an amazing message, and I encourage you all to go out and read it and buy it. And thank you for having the courage for sharing your story.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much.
I love it because it's sort of like, oh, do you want to use that? You want to say that? I don't want to take your words out of your mouth.
That's all right. To have this heritage and
Hang on. Ellie, can you please take the cat because she's like attacking Nat's head.
it's like, get out of my house.
Sorry, Nat. I'm so
That's
sorry.
right.
Oh, Ellie girl. The lights just turned off. Could you just come and check it, sweetie?
Didn't let that happen.
Oh gosh, we did charge them. It's just maybe it's just because it's on an angle. Are you okay? Yeah. Oh, you're beautiful, Nat. Thanks, Ellie.